Welcome back to Let's Talk Sports Radio right here on 94.9 Bob FM. Joining me now, TSN reporter for mixed martial arts, Aaron Bronsteter. Aaron, the man on the go. Once again, we caught you in New York last week, and you gave us a great preview of the card, and the card delivered. Jorge Masvidal defeats Nate Diaz via TKO. Referee stops it at the end of the third round to win the BMF title, trophy, whatever you want to call it. But certainly a dominant win by Masvidal at welterweight, now positioning himself for a pretty good position to perhaps get a title fight, maybe the winner of Colby Covington versus the champion Kamaru Usman. What did you think of Masvidal last Saturday at UFC 244?
Yeah, very impressive performance by Masvidal. He went from basically bell to bell. There weren't really any moments where he was in any danger. He knocked Nate Diaz down. He just looked like the far better fighter. Now, the thing about this is, I don't know how much it actually proves in the pecking order of 170. He's right there, but, we've also got Woodley, who obviously hasn't fought since he lost the title. He seems to be taking his spots. Leon Edwards had a fantastic performance in his last fight against Rafael dos Anjos. Really looked fantastic in that fight. So, if you look at who Masvidal's beaten, he has that win over Till. Fantastic win at 170 because Till had just fought for the title. Win over Ben Askren, who was undefeated. And then the win over Nate Diaz. The funny thing is, Nate Diaz is probably the least impressive of the three wins when you look at it from the pecking order of 170. Now, Masvidal was already in the mix for the title at 170 and was told he was going to get a title shot had he won his fight against Ben Askren. So I think a title shot is on the horizon for him. It looks like Edwards and Woodley are going to be matched up. So I think that it makes a whole lot of sense to give him a title shot next. I just think it's funny coming off of probably the least, the win that means the least at 170 pounds. But be that as it may, he looked absolutely fantastic. And the world is his. Like Scarface, the world is yours. The world is his right now. He's got a bevy of options for how he can make money in this game, whether it's a fight with McGregor in the middle of next year, whether it's a title shot, or whether he holds up for that Nate rematch. I mean, there's a lot of big possibilities for Jorge Masvidal, and he can afford to be choosy.
And just a little bit on the stoppage itself. Do you agree? Do you have any issues with the referee stopping it? Nate Diaz, two pretty nasty cuts over his right eye. Did you agree with it? It was a fair stoppage, yes or no?
Well, here's the thing. We just saw Tyson Fury get absolutely pieced up in his fight in Las Vegas. They let him fight all the way through 12 rounds. That cut happened in the third or fourth round, and it was an awful cut. So when people say if this fight was in Nevada, it wouldn't have gotten stopped, it's, I think, 100% accurate, at least 99% accurate. But New York, play it safe. They've always been a committed to play it safe. They don't seem to succumb that much to political pressure. They did in the case with Eric Morales in boxing with the USADA failed drug test. They let him box anyways. But they came under a lot of scrutiny for that. And it seems like since then, and since some other situations that have happened where I think a boxer fell into a coma a couple years ago because the fight wasn't stopped when maybe it should have been, they tend to err on the side of caution. And I think that's what happened here. I do think that if it happened in Nevada, it would have continued. People have made the case that, Nate Diaz seems to get cut in that same spot every fight. So, why would they stop it in this situation? And I just think it's a commission-by-commission thing. It's case-by-case, and it's a judgment call. People are threatening the life of his doctor and showing up at his practice, asking to speak to him. Those people should come up with some better things to do in their life than do something like that. I'll say it wasn't as egregious as maybe some made it out to be, but I do think that it could have continued. You hear people like Big John McCarthy say that it should have continued, and if he says that, he has more of an expert opinion than probably anybody else in the sport, at least from the referee standpoint, maybe even a judging standpoint, because he teaches those courses as well. But from a medical standpoint, sometimes you got to trust the doctors in there, that they know what they're doing. Again, it's just a judgment call on the side of the doctors. What happens if something terrible happens to Nate Diaz? What happens if he loses his vision forever? Is that doctor going to be able to sleep at night? Probably not. So you got to kind of go with the medical professionals and just assume they know what they're doing.
Yeah, fair enough. I would agree. Let's go to the co-main. Something you touched on last week. You said this is a high upside fight for Darren Till, debuting at middleweight against Kelvin Gastelum, where it was, low upside, for him taking this fight. And, Darren Till goes out there and he gets a split decision win over Kelvin Gastelum. Then now he's in the top 5 of the middleweight rankings in a very active division. And he's positioned himself quite good after this win. Kelvin Gastelum, really uninspiring performance. Darren Till, smart, calculated, looked quite good. What did you think of Darren Till's performance, and who does he have next? Because you have the champion Israel Adesanya. Paulo Costa's out with injury. People are looking at Yoel Romero for his next fight. You got Jared Cannonier coming out of a knockout win over Jack Hermanson. Sitting right there, the top of the middleweight division looking pretty good, and Darren Till's put himself right in the mix after a win on Saturday, yes?
Yeah, certainly great timing for Darren Till. I mean, Darren Till was in a position where he had lost 2 in a row, finished in both occasions, one by submission, one by knockout, and he seemed like he was in no man's land at welterweight. Moves up to middleweight, fights Gastelum, who's kind of been the boogeyman of the division, really. I mean, other than Yoel Romero, he's the guy that was running through everybody, and then he had the fight with Adesanya. He looked good, and gave him quite a fight. He's the champion now. So Gastelum is at the top of the food chain, and it was. I've said this all along. I thought it was a very low risk, high reward fight for Till because the expectation was that he was going to lose, and he fought the exact fight that you need to fight to beat Kelvin Gastelum. Outpoint him. We've seen Gastelum get outpointed before. Don't try to do anything crazy. Don't put yourself in risky situations. And fight a smart game plan. And Till did the same thing against Wonderboy. People underestimate the fight IQ of Darren Till. It's actually quite high. He's shown this time and time again. Now, with Masvidal, if you heard him talking coming into that fight, he was talking about how he just wanted to be viewed as like the hardest guy in the sport. He wanted to be, show that he can stand with anybody. It was and he hurt Masvidal early in that fight, but you've got to understand that's not necessarily the best way to go about fighting. And in this particular outing, seems like he came to the table similar to how he did with Stephen Thompson. Very, very methodical, well thought out, game plan with a high fight IQ. He looked very good against Gastelum. I don't think that it was an impressive performance, but it was at the very least a win against a guy who was top 5. I think Gastelum was ranked 4th, if I'm not mistaken, going into that fight. So now Till, new ratings have come out, he's now a top 5 middleweight. And a lot of the middleweights ahead of him are migrating to different divisions. It's a perfect timing situation for him. He's 27 years old. Or I think he's 28, 27 or 28. Either way, I think he's turning 28 soon. But still, he's basically entering his prime. And I think that down the line, if he can win one more fight, you're going to see him against Israel, and that's going to be a big fight, whether it's held in Europe, whether it's held in Australia, or even in North America. Darren Till's back. He's back on the map. And while the win wasn't necessarily impressive, he beat a very impressive opponent. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy to beat Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum, again, is one of the toughest guys in the division. And a match that I don't think a lot of people expected him to win. It wasn't anything fancy. Wasn't anything super impressive, but he got the job done. And now suddenly he's jockeying for position in a less crowded middleweight division. It's perfect timing for him. And it looks like the move up really helped him. He made weight, even though he had a lot of issues with his visa, and he got into New York fairly late in the week, very late in the week actually, compared to most fighters from overseas when they come in. Usually they're in on the weekend. He got in, I think, on Wednesday or Thursday. So with that in mind, I mean, for him to be able to cut the weight no problem, come in, have a performance like that, I think you got to tip your hat to Darren Till, because now he's right back in the mix in a brand new division.
And who would you like to see him fight next? Would you put him in there with Cannonier if you're making the matches?
Cannonier makes sense. Basically, the way that I look at it is if you take any of the guys in the top 5 or 6, match them up together, if they haven't fought each other in the past, and I mean, Till's new to middleweight, so he hasn't fought most of them, I think any of those situations make sense. So I think you can match Till up with Whitaker. I think that's a big fight. I think you can match Till up with Cannonier. That's a solid fight. A lot of options right now, and Yoel Romero might be next in line for the title, but it's not Yoel Romero against any of these guys. Cannonier, Till, Whitaker. Well, Whitaker was seen already, but Cannonier or Till, they make a lot of sense. So I think that there are some options for Darren Till that are going to come up sooner rather than later. We got to see who Israel's fighting next. It might not be Romero. It looks like the UFC brass are a little bit worried about how that looks optically, given that Romero's 1-3 in his last 4. Paulo Costa's injured. He's going to be out for 8 or 9 months. So, the UFC is trying to figure out what's next, and I think Darren Till can afford to just sit back and wait for the right situation.
All right, the rest of the fights, who impressed you the most? Kevin Lee, first-round knockout, decision win for Derek Lewis at heavyweight, or Stephen Wonderboy Thompson with a decision win at welterweight? Which one impressed you the most?
Oh, you got to go with Kevin Lee. I mean, Thompson had an win over Luke, but Thompson was the favorite in that fight. Kevin Lee was kind of written off. It's a very similar situation to Darren Till. They're both about the same age, only a couple months apart. Both had been on their first losing streaks of their career, lost two in a row, and people had kind of written them off. Now, Kevin Lee takes a very risky, again, a very high-risk, low-reward fight against Gregor Gillespie because Gregor Gillespie's undefeated. He hasn't really fought high-level competition yet. Everybody's been afraid to fight Gregor Gillespie because he's, was a national champion in wrestling. And he goes in there and gets a first-round knockout, and Kevin Lee's not known for knocking guys out. It just goes to show the improvement that Kevin Lee has under Faraz Zahabi. Talking to Kevin backstage, he says Faraz Zahabi's a wizard, like he's a brilliant mind, and he also is still working with his previous team in Las Vegas. So it looked like Kevin Lee's putting it all together. It seems like his weigh-in was okay. He didn't look bad on the scale. So Kevin Lee basically has been getting rid of every distraction in his life outside of fighting. He's focused 100% on fighting. He's moved to Montreal. He's in the dorms with his brother Keith Lee in Montreal, getting better and better every day. And I think that really showed there. Again, Gregor Gillespie, previously undefeated, one of the best wrestlers in the sport, was completely neutralized. First down finish for Kevin Lee in absolutely spectacular fashion. I mean, even Gregor Gillespie said it was a beautiful knockout after the fact. So Kevin Lee's walk his way up. So I think his win is probably the most impressive of the ones you mentioned.
And then lastly, Corey Anderson gets a knockout as well in the first round over Johnny Walker. Puts him right in the mix at light heavyweight. What'd you think of Corey Anderson? Made a real statement.
Corey Anderson wants the title shot next. And I think you can make a case for him, but I think you also have to make a case for Dominic Reyes. And John Jones tweeted yesterday, I've watched tape of Corey. I had a coach's meeting, we watched tape of Corey Anderson and Dominic Reyes. He goes, I think Dominic is the more dangerous opponent, so Dominic's the one that I want to fight next. Johnny Walker was a very tough opponent. Looked like the next up-and-coming guy at 205. Ends up losing to Corey Anderson and losing in spectacular fashion. So, Corey Anderson, like Kevin Lee, also not known for his finishing ability, gets a first-round finish over a very, very tough opponent that a lot of people thought was going to beat him. He was also an underdog in that fight. So, these are things you need to consider when you're looking at the level of competition. Reyes was a pretty sizable favorite over Chris Weidman, whereas Anderson was the underdog. So these are things you need to take into consideration when you're making title shots and deciding how dominant a specific victory was.
All right, last but not least, UFC heads to Moscow this weekend, headlined by a great fight at featherweight, Zabit Magomed-Shapirov versus Calvin Kattar. And then co-main, Alexander Volkov at heavyweight takes on Greg Hardy. You just remember Hardy with that no contest because of the controversial use of an asthma puffer. But in a very interesting heavyweight division, it looks like it's going to be, Cormier-Stipe 3 sometime in 2020. You got Ngannou who's looking for a fight. Derek Lewis just got a win. I believe Junior Dos Santos just backed out of a fight due to an injury or a skin infection, I believe. So this is an interesting fight. If you're Greg Hardy, you could put yourself in prime position for a pretty top end, kind of move up the heavyweight rankings here. And then Zabit, who's been someone that you've mentioned a number of times as a rising featherweight, gets a good fight close to home.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a huge opportunity for Greg Hardy. And he's a pretty sizable underdog in this one, and that makes a lot of sense. From a sheer X's and O's standpoint, Volkov should be able to outpoint him and get a victory with his volume. But there's always the great intangible, which is Greg Hardy's constant improvement and his power. And I spoke to Greg Hardy's manager actually over the weekend, and I said to him, Hardy looks, the inhaler thing really distracted from the point that Hardy had made some pretty noticeable improvements if you just look at it from X's and O's standpoint. Ignore the inhaler. Look at his footwork. Look at his striking defense. It looked great. I said the only thing that he didn't do in that fight was commit to his punches. And his manager didn't necessarily agree with me. And I said, had he committed more to his punches, he probably would have finished his opponent faster. If he's able to commit to his punches, if he doesn't hold back, because his best way to win this fight is by knockout. And I think that's very easily understood. But don't try to prove a point. Don't try to say, I can outpoint this guy. There's no point in doing that. Volkov is one of the toughest guys to outpoint in the heavyweight division because in I think 50% of his fights, he's landed 100 or more significant strikes, and that's at heavyweight, which is pretty unheard of. Like, that kind of volume at heavyweight is not normal. So if you're going to try to outpoint Volkov, you're not going to win. But if you commit to your punches, if you try to find the right spot, if Volkov gets a little bit careless with his volume or he falls into a false sense of security like he did against Derek Lewis when he got knocked out with 10 seconds left in the fight, that's where he's going to be able to find success, and that's what he needs to do in order to win this fight. So I think that if Hardy throws caution to the wind, if he doesn't think that Volkov's going to be able to knock him out, and Volkov is able to do that, but not quite as easily as a lot of the other top 10 heavyweights, he's going to have some success, and I think that that's his best task. And in the main event, you got Zabit Nurmagomedov against Calvin Kattar. This is an interesting one because Kattar has been a guy that's been an underdog in a lot of spots, and he's come through. And he's a very, very technical, powerful puncher. And Zabit is a guy that gets hit. Now, Zabit, I think, is one of the best prospects in the sport. I'm not trying to disrespect Zabit when I say that he gets hit. But when you get hit by somebody like Calvin Kattar, if you don't get out of there, you could be finished. And that's what happened with Ricardo Lamas. And Ricardo Lamas is no slouch. He's been around. He's fought for the title. He's one of the top guys at 145. And Kattar, basically made him look dumb. That's how good he was in that last fight in Chicago. So now you look at Zabit. This was the fight that was supposed to happen in Boston. Ends up going to Moscow, and Kattar takes it. Kattar wants it to be 5 rounds. Zabit says, no, we're going to do 3 rounds. I don't know how much Zabit has recovered from this infection. Having an infection like that stops you from training. It can hinder your fight camp. I do think that Zabit is the better fighter. I do think Zabit has more tools. But I also know that Kattar is a very tough out. I don't think that Zabit's going to be able to finish Calvin Kattar. He might prove me wrong, but if Zabit is able to win this fight, and I think if he does, it'll probably be by decision, I think he's going to fight for a title next year. I think that we'll see what happens with Holloway Volkanovski, but I think he would be next in line for a title shot if he gets a win here. He's a very, very impressive prospect. It's weird to call him a prospect because he's actually older than Max Holloway. He just hasn't been around the UFC for that long. But I think that this is going to be the fight for him to prove what he can do. The win over Jeremy Stephens, while impressive, Jeremy Stephens is a 500 fighter in the UFC. Calvin Kattar has overcome. He's beaten Shane Burgos. Look at how good Shane Burgos was this past weekend. So he's beaten a lot of quality opponents, and I think that a win over Burgos would mean a whole heck of a lot for. Not a win over Burgos. A win over Zabit would mean a whole heck of a lot for Kattar. Might even put him in title contention. So these are things to look out for in this particular fight.
Good stuff. That's mixed martial arts reporter Aaron Bronsteter from TSN out of Toronto, Ontario. Thanks for taking a few minutes to chat with us. UFC Fight Night 163 heads to Moscow this weekend. Thanks, Aaron.
My pleasure, Jordan.
All right, more Let's Talk Sports Radio coming up after this. Stick around.
This is Let's Talk Sports Radio with sports guy Jordan Armitage.
All right to the water, all right to the pitch.
On 94.9 Bob FM.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And we are live with the mics turned all the way up. Good morning, K-Man. Jordan Armitage here. Let's Talk Sports, episode 23, live on 94.9 Bob FM. Joined also live in studio by my good friend and fellow namesake, J Stubbs, Jordan Stubblefield, making his triumphant debut. Hey, buddy, how are you?
Wow.
Sibilance.
Thanks for having me, Jordan. I appreciate it. I almost called you the wrong name.
It's all right, man.
My name, I don't even know.
Your brother always wanted to be on the show, so I figured I'd start with you and see how the family tree works out, even though you're the younger one, aren't you?
My voice is not as deep as his. If you can imagine, he has actually a deeper voice.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the thing is, Jordan, he's got that Nashville Southern now that he lives in Nashville, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, and today's show, we got a little UFC, a couple nice matchups in Moscow. Starts at 2 p.m., so if you're down there at the Pirates Week parade and you like MMA more, then you're probably going to want to rush out of there. Then we got Formula One. Lewis Hamilton clinches yet again last week in Austin, Texas. But first, that's why Jordan is here. We're here to talk a little bit of everything, starting with college football. A matchup of two number ones. LSU versus Alabama goes tonight. Tua Tagovailoa back on the... Did it.
Good. That's good.
Tua Tagovailoa.
You know what?
Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah.
Anyways, he's been out 3 weeks. Arguably, he has a good chance of going number one in the NFL draft.
Yes.
It depends. I think Miami's, everyone keeps saying tank for Tua, but
Miami won.
And they beat my beloved lowly New York Jets. What a pathetic group of...
Jets are terrible.
They are trash.
Seeing ghosts.
But this is a big game in college football. You're a big college fan. You got ties to Alabama.
Yep. Born in Birmingham.
There you go.
England? No, Birmingham, Alabama. Yeah, if for all that who don't know about college football, in the South, where I'm originally from, again, born in Birmingham, it's like a religion. It's like a religion. And one of the first things they'll say to you is, which side are you on? You know, we're talking about Alabama and Auburn in the great state of Alabama. So,
two great football schools that have produced so many players.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you got to pick one side or the other. And, you know, my brother, as we just mentioned, was a huge Alabama fan. So I obviously became a huge Alabama fan and have been for many years through their ups and downs. So I just want to make sure that we're on the same page here. I am not a bandwagon fan. I've been born and bred to love the Tide. So
there you go.
So roll Tide.
Well, there you are. And so talk about the importance of this game right now in the college football rankings. There's 4 teams actually that are 8-0 right now. Right. Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, and Penn State. So LSU is ranked 2, Alabama's ranked 3, Ohio State is ranked 1st, and Penn State is ranked 4th. Then you still have Clemson, who's 5th,
right?
And they're 9-0.
The defending champion, who's on the outside looking in. How crazy is that? It's all about what have you done for me lately in college football. It's such a competitive sport that if you're not winning and winning big against good teams, then they don't even talk about you and it being in the top 1, 2, or 3.
And that's why you have Clemson 5th because of strength of schedule.
They play in the ACC, but I think it's a little bit odd, and this is coming from an Alabama fan. I think it's a little odd that you got the defending national champion who's undefeated just because they haven't looked the best from the eye test. They're on the outside looking in. I think it's a little odd, but obviously today's going to change that because you have 2 playing 3. And no matter what, somebody's gonna drop out of that top 4, and Clemson will come in if they win. Obviously, I don't even know who they play.
They play NC State.
Oh, okay. So
Wolfpack,
the school for the deaf and blind that they're playing. I don't think NC State has a win.
Penn State plays Minnesota, so that's
gonna be a good game.
Yeah. 4 versus 17.
Yeah, absolutely. Minnesota is undefeated. They look good. Their head coach is really, really good, and they have the support of Kevin Morales. Formerly of.
C27, rest in peace. So talk about this game, Alabama versus LSU. The history, obviously, you already mentioned, having to pick between Auburn and Alabama, living in that state. What about, Tua coming back after injury, number 1 pick, it's quarterback-driven league, NFL. These, is it this early in the season? It's such an important game. Yes,
right. Yeah. So, like I said, if you can lose one game and it can knock you out. Because Alabama's strength of schedule is not the best. If they lose this game, they're going to be on the outside looking in, just like how Clemson is now. LSU, they've had a very, very difficult season, and they've gone 8-0. Now, for those who don't know, LSU in the past, their offense has been very, very lukewarm. It's been kind of
hot and
ground
cold.
And pound.
I mean, it has produced some of the great NFL players like Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry. You see DJ Chark, wide receiver. It's a very good receiving school. Leonard Fournette.
As a running back. But that's the weird thing about it is they produce all these great
skill players, but they really never did. They never were at their full potential in college because they never really had anybody to throw them the ball. Yeah.
Now they got somebody who can throw them the ball in Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
He's a transfer from Ohio State.
Yeah.
He was one of the ones that was able to go in the transfer portal.
Yes.
Which they just a little bit of controversy over that because back in the day, you used to, if you transferred from one division school,
you had to wait a year.
Sit out a year,
a red shirt,
or burn a year if you've already used your red shirt. So now you can go and play immediately for another college. So Joe Burrow, he left Ohio State, now is at LSU. Had a kind of a rough last year, but now is putting up dynamite numbers. He's actually the front runner for the Heisman Trophy.
2,800 yards, 30 touchdowns, and only 4 picks. So there you are.
And the person right behind him is Tua.
Who's missed 3 weeks?
Who's missed the last 1.5 games? They had a bye last week, so that was nice. He was able to get a procedure that was already done on his right, on his left ankle. It was done now on his right. It's a preventative, almost like a bracket that's put in on your ankle that allows for you not to sprain your ankle.
And if you're blown away by Jordan's medical acumen, that's because he is in the medical industry. So he is actually Let's Talk Sports Radio's injury czar, injury savant. So when athletes get injured, we will ask Jordan, of course, for his input. So there you go, right there. Tua, just over 2,100 yards, 27 TDs, and 2 interceptions. So he's right there with Joe Burrow in terms stat wise. Let me ask you this: Alabama. They produce a number of NFL players.
Absolutely.
Just off the top of my head, I mean, there's so many. Even the front line of Washington, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen. You look like my team, the Jets. You got C.J. Mosley. You look.
Julio Jones, Mark Ingram, Trent Richardson,
Derrick Henry. I think he plays for the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the CFL now. Derrick Henry. Damian Harris, the list goes on and on. But because Nick Saban, coached in both college, I think he's the highest paid college coach. Walked away from the NFL. People say that Alabama players, have a little bit more off the tread when they come into the NFL because of the pro style system, because they play so hard. You are a lifelong Alabama fan. True, false, and what's your take on that?
So I think that it shifted a little bit. You saw a lot of Alabama players be complacent when they got to the pros, because sometimes it's not a letdown, but a lot of times they have so much hype coming out of college. I think it's gotten better. There is a lot of wear and tear on those guys, especially the running backs now. Back in the day, it's a little bit better now for the running backs. Now there's a lot more passing that goes on, because for many years Alabama was, here's what we're going to do. We're going to hand the ball off and run it down your throat. That's changed. Mm-hmm. College football has changed. Football in general has changed. So you're getting a lot of players. Yes, they may have a lot more injuries, but no other university has more players in the NFL than Alabama.
Yeah.
And the second is Ohio State, third LSU.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about 2 programs that put massive talent into the NFL, which is. It's incredible to see something like that. And you're going to see, this is going to be the best football game of the season. I can guarantee you that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a big.
You can take my prediction here in a little bit, but not yet. Let's tease them a little bit.
Good thing that the UFC is on it too. Maybe we'll grab an adult beverage and watch it.
Sure, why not?
And just ignore Pirates Week.
So hot.
I want to talk about Tua. Like I keep probing. He's arguably going to be the number 1 pick, if he gets healthy. He said he got a medical procedure on his ankle.
Yep.
You have a lot of these. You see this year what mobile quarterback can do. Lamar Jackson, he's arguably the MVP this year
so far,
and nobody's rushed and threw for as many yards as he has in a single. He's going to surpass Michael Vick, Falcons great quarterback. Hundreds of yards. He is going way past what Vick's done. And tell the listener, the average sports fan, what kind of player is Tua? Is he near what a Lamar Jackson is? Is he a grade below? What are his strengths? What are his weaknesses?
So he is not what I would say a Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is, and you'll hear a lot of, he's an anomaly. And Lamar Jackson reminds me a lot of, to talk about Lamar real quick, he reminds me a lot of RG3. But the problem with that is he's bigger than RG3. He's about, I think Lamar Jackson's like 6'2", 6'3".
I would say he's more mobile though too.
Definitely more mobile. But RG3 was very mobile, but he doesn't have as good of an arm. So it concerns me because NFL season's 16 games. Plus you have the 4 preseason games, which by the way I think they should do away with.
Yeah.
But it's fun to watch him. I lived in Baltimore 10 years, so they're actually my team.
So you see how like Baltimore is one of those gritty American towns where it's
a rough town.
I don't know if you've ever seen The Wire, but
good show. It's true.
Great. It's
true. I lived in the suburbs.
It means a lot. Football means a lot to them. Obviously.
Yeah, a lot of blue collar workers, and it's what they get up. They go tailgating. Tailgating's huge. I mean, you're barbecuing. You have crabs. Not actually physically have crabs. You eat the crabs.
Good to know.
Good to know. And you have beers, and it's like a low country boil type scenario. Yeah. But going back, Tua, he is a pro style quarterback in the essence of drop back passer. Very accurate throwing, not going to be super mobile, but it can run if he needs to.
Yeah.
Because you can't be a one-trick pony in the NFL. You've got to be able to run as well.
However, touching a little bit on Lamar, you saw what they did to New England last week. They tried to make him throw, and he just said whatever, and he ran around the New England, the best defense in the NFL by, as your folk might like to call it, a country mile. So there we are. Sure. So, I mean, so speak a little bit so he can get the job done. Is he the best quarterback in college football right now?
Biasedly and unbiasedly, he is.
Really?
I mean, there's a reason why there's so much smoke being talked about
Give me your
about
top
him.
5 quarterbacks in college football right now.
You know,
because we know that 2 to 3 are going to go in the first round.
Oh.
And you know that Miami's looking at Tua at this game.
Everybody builds around quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it is. The cool thing about what Harbaugh did in Baltimore is with what was left in the draft, he took and then built around them.
Mm-hmm.
So typically they look for quarterbacks to fit into their system. Harbaugh did something totally different. He picked a guy and then built it around him. What a concept.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this unbelievable athlete, and then you build it around him. And
It's kind of the opposite of what the Jets are doing. Like, pick a quarterback and then don't draft an offensive lineman for like the last 10 years.
Sam Darnold, I bet he's
Super
a nice
talented.
guy, a great guy, good-looking guy, probably gets a lot of girls.
Hey, just
But
got
guess
over
what?
mono, the kissing disease.
How do you get that? I got that once.
A kissing over. Come.
While I was with my wife, and she didn't get it. That was the weirdest thing ever. She's like, "What is this?
Sam
You have
Darnold,
mono?"
give me a kiss.
I don't know. I got it from a water fountain. I have no idea what happened there. So top quarterbacks,
Jets, not building around their best talent.
No, not at all. Top quarterbacks: Tua, then Joe Burrow, then I'd put the quarterback from Oregon,
Herbert.
Yeah, Justin Herbert.
Yeah,
tall
Who
guy.
could have come out last year, but chose to go back.
Yeah, you don't see that a lot, and I think now that you're going to start seeing players be able to be paid for their likeness.
Yeah. What do you think about that, by the way?
I don't know. Mixed feelings. We'll see. I think the bigger are just going to keep getting bigger. Because if you've got, Liberty University, which is a heck of a university, which I know a guy who went there, played Division I baseball.
What's their mascot or their insignia? Or?
The Flames. Because let me explain that. The reason why is the Flames are the light of the world. You're laughing, but that's what we are. It's a very religious school to where I went. I'm a Southern Baptist guy.
There you go.
So we're the light of the world.
So you
Salt and light.
You don't like Sean Clifford,
Who's
Penn
that?
State quarterback?
What is he? Oh no, as far as going,
That's our top 5.
I don't.
Really?
I don't like him.
Really?
No. But who's the fact that I don't know his name? That means he's not. I mean, yeah, there might be some hype around him, but no.
What about Ohio State?
Yeah, so their quarterback is he was at Georgia and he transferred after they lost their
Justin
quarterback.
Fields,
but he's just a sophomore. So in college, you have to be at least a junior
to get drafted.
School wise, not necessarily how many years you played.
Yeah,
but school wise. That's why you're seeing so many players out of high school. They come to the university in January so that they can get ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
So they're already at half a year ahead. You got guys that are graduating. Remember back in the day, SMU before they got the death penalty?
Yeah.
Those guys were not even going to school.
Explain what that is for the listeners that don't know what. So SMU. I mean, people that follow sports and watch 30 for 30 on ESPN know what that is, but. Talk about what the death penalty was. What was it?
So the death penalty, it's only happened one time in college football. Penn State almost got it due to their dealings with child abuse from Jerry Sandusky. But SMU actually got the death penalty, which meant the program had to shut down for a certain amount of years. I think it's 5 years where you cannot play football. You cannot have anything going at all. So they had to physically shut the program down for 5 years. And they call it the death penalties because it pretty much destroys the program altogether.
Yes.
Now, a cool story about this is SMU has come back from the ashes. They actually played last week on primetime television and actually played Memphis. They lost.
1987, by the way.
1987.
And it's given to repeat violators with NCAA rules. So what were they giving the death penalty again?
Well, I have an X-rated version and a
recruiting violations.
It was more than that. Paying their recruits, taking them to
adult entertainment.
Yeah.
So there's the thing though, like let's go back to, we were teasing it earlier. So now NCAA athletes, this is obviously going to affect basketball and college.
Everything.
Basketball and football. American football.
They can now revenue generating.
They can now get paid. This is the ultimate debate when it comes to college sports, by the way, which I'd like you to weigh in. So now they've ruled that college athletes get paid for their likeness. Why that's important? College athletes can't work when they're in school. And for the people that are on the one side of the argument, well, they're getting a free education, they're getting their meals free. The fact of the matter is that these schools make tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars profiting off of their talent. So the fact that they can't get paid like for playing, there's lots of shady activity in college sports. Boosters paying athletes, things like that. It's a real shame that the schools benefit off of their talent, but they, in football, you have to play for 3 years before you have to be a junior before you can get drafted.
Can happen in those 3 years.
Exactly. This, especially in football, where the average career is 3 to 4 years in the NFL. So, you tell me now, are athletes going to be able to actually benefit off their likeness, or are the NCAA going to still find ways to keep the money into the schools' pockets?
They passed along California, and I'm not sure what your opinion is of the state of California, but they're definitely have some different viewpoints that are not necessarily copacetic with the rest of the country.
Well, it gives California schools a recruiting edge.
Absolutely, it does.
Like a huge edge. So why not just put it across the board?
And I think what you're going to see is that's going to happen. I think
Cal Berkeley's football program is going to be amazing.
Cal Polytech.
You know what I'm saying?
The Banana Slugs.
That's where Aaron Rodgers went.
Yeah. But I think what you're going to see is it's going to be a trend that's going to happen, and it's going to go throughout. I mean, I see both sides of the story on this.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I love college football so much is because you've got a walk-on that played in high school and that can walk on a team and make an impact in a game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's cool. Where you can't really have that in the NFL. It's not something that exists. So you there's some underdog situations that you look at, and then also the volatility of the games, like the fact that somebody can be favored by 31 points and lose, which happened to Wisconsin this year. They were favored by 31.5, and they lost by like 3 to, I think it was Minnesota.
Okay,
so it's crazy. So it's just, plus again, SEC can't beat that.
Well, you've educated our listeners. I feel smarter after this conversation. That's for sure.
If I can do that helps. 2
rapid fire questions that we got to wrap. So number 1, the prediction tonight: Alabama LSU with score. And then number 2, you wanted to touch on it, so I'm happy to do so. United States senior men's national football team coming to play Cuba, first time ever in Cayman. As an American, very excited. A monumental moment for sports in the Cayman Islands.
Absolutely.
We'll start with college football. What's your prediction tonight?
35-28. I know that's kind of a generic score, but I think that's what it's going to take, and I think your Roll Tides are going to win it.
Roll Tide. Yeah. All right, and I'll let you close out. Thoughts on USA coming to play Cuba here in CONCACAF Nations League. History made in sports.
So this is actually when I was talking to you about it a week or so ago. This is huge. I mean, this is the men's national teams from both these countries. Cuba, which is a great sports country, and then obviously the United States, who obviously with as far as population and sports is big, and they're coming. They came in to play a
meaningful football game. Yeah, I know.
I mean, we need to go. You want to talk about seeing some great football, or as in soccer football. I know soccer's a bad word down here, but
no worries.
I mean, God, I have no. I obviously I'm from the United States, and I'm rooting for him. But
yes,
this is amazing that you're going to be able to see such a high. This is going to be the highest level of football that's ever going to be able to be played here.
And you hear my voice in the promo, but let me explain it to you. World Cup implications on the line. This is CONCACAF Nations League top group, okay? So the winner of the group goes through the CONCACAF Championship semifinals, number 1. Number 2, Canada leads this group right now with 3 wins. They play USA after beating USA last month for the first time in 34 years, 2-0 at home in Toronto. Congrats. So thank you so much. It's huge, huge, huge. So now, next Friday, 6 days from now, Canada travels to Orlando to play USA. USA, let's say they win. They improve.
They must win.
They have to win that game. They have to beat Canada. Then they have to come here and they have to play Cuba. So they've already beaten Cuba pretty handily. I think the score is 8-0. But they have to produce at that same level to ensure that they go through the CONCACAF Championship. And mind you, they've already qualified for the hexagonal, but Canada has only made the World Cup once. Wow. So for them to be able to stay in the top 6, which gets you into the region's CONCACAF hexagonal, which is how you qualify out of the region for World Cup, right, only the top 3 go through.
That's okay. So again, I don't know a lot about this,
but that's all you need to know right there. They can play spoiler for Canada, this is the golden age for football in Canada right now.
And the USA's beatable. I mean,
of course they are.
They've struggled lately, honestly.
Yes.
So I mean, they're loss rebuilding to Jamaica, and I think they lost to Mexico, which is the first time they've lost to Mexico in a while. But yeah, I mean, this is exciting. And I can go ahead and tell you, either ESPN or Fox. I think Fox has the rights to that. They're going to be down here.
Of course they will.
Now it's going to be broadcast to literally a billion people all around the world.
That's right. Be a part of history. Tuesday, 2 weeks Tuesday, the 19th at the Trumbaden Sports Complex. Jordan Stubblefield, thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Passing marks, high grades for you, my man.
Hey, this has been a dream to always sit down with you, Jordan. You know what? If the public agree, what about a J&J?
Well,
Johnson & Johnson or Jordan & Jordan.
Hopefully, you can get a sponsor for that.
I think I know of a medical company that might sponsor you. Maybe
it's a good idea. We'll talk about that off air. More Let's Talk Sports right here on 94.9 Bob FM. Stick around. Welcome back to Let's Talk Sports Radio right here on 94.9 Bob FM. Joining me now, he's been on Let's Talk Sports on the silver screen. Well, I guess that's what they call movies. But now you've heard him on Z99, and he's making his way to 94.9 Bob FM. It's the return of Brighton's finest, Mark Lee.
The principal of Formula One is once again back on Let's Talk Sports.
Welcome back, sir. And it goes, of course, you are here to talk Formula One, and that is because Lewis Hamilton moves that much closer to Formula One infamy. He claims his 6th world title, now just trailing Michael Schumacher with 7, and his 3rd in a row, finishing 2nd last Sunday at the U.S. Grand Prix. Teammate Valtteri Bottas finishes 1st. Will probably end up 2nd overall in the driver's standings.
Yeah, I would say.
And now Mercedes, of course, winning the double again.
Yeah.
Putting themselves as the winningest constructor driver combo of all time.
Of all time, yeah.
Let's start with Lewis himself. Just reading a little bit, online, Will Buxton and, David Will Buxton, Martin Brundle, writing some things.
Crofty, yeah, they're all writing about it.
They're all writing about it, and they're all talking about, where does Lewis Hamilton fit in terms of the conversation for greatest driver of all time? I'll put that to you.
Well, of course, one thing we mustn't forget, 6 world championships now takes him ahead of the legend that was Fangio, of course. You can't forget Fangio, one of the greatest drivers of all time. And like you quite rightly said, just 1 championship behind the the great Michael Schumacher. Obviously, he had a tragic skiing accident, so he's been out of the scene. No one quite knows what's going on. There's an air of mystery sort of around that at the moment. Rumours that he's been having stem cell treatment to regenerate his body in a clinic in Paris, actually, they say. But so just 1 behind Michael Schumacher. I think it was an outstanding season for Lewis, and even when they had difficulties against Ferrari in the middle of the season, he didn't seem to let it affect his drive and determination. And this is the thing about Formula One. That mid-season change, especially after the summer break, that's when we see changes in the performance of cars. So that when they came to the start of the season, Mercedes were like, we are not sure we're going to be better than Ferrari when they started off in Australia way back at the start of the year. They had a great start to the season. They dipped in the middle a little bit. Ferrari really got their game together and kind of brought it to Mercedes. And they had a very confident and very well-performing mid-season. In actual fact, I think we need to say much to the credit of Charles Leclerc, because Sebastian hasn't been getting together with the car this year really at all. He hasn't found it to his liking. He hasn't found the setup of the car and some of the aero to his liking. So Charles Leclerc really was, and this is a weird thing to say when you think about Sebastian Vettel, also a 3-time world champion. Isn't it funny that the rookie has been outperforming Sebastian with Ferrari this year? Ferrari had a great mid-season, and then it's all kind of tailed off a little bit towards the end. Mercedes brought it back up, and like Lewis said to his chief engineer Bono, who was actually off for a couple of weeks having surgery, that, the team works so hard, and it's not just the driver. Everyone sees the driver, and, you see him in the spotlight all the time. But back at Brackley in the UK, where Mercedes are based, 1,500 people work combined to make the Mercedes team what it is.
Big business and big money. You're interesting. We talk. I want to go back to Lewis Hamilton, but since you bring up the Tifosi, the Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, wins Belgium. then goes into Italy, wins the home race in Italy. And then in Singapore, you start to see that little rift because then the undercut, as we will never forget, puts Vettel ahead of Leclerc, who was leading at the time, and then puts him ahead for the rest of the race in terms of stoppages. So they did make, obviously, Lewis.
A tactical decision.
Yeah, a tactical decision. And there's been that, not a rift, but I mean, something has been going on there. But, you're right. They have tailed off. Leclerc, finished third in Russia. Finished sixth in Japan, fourth in Mexico, and then he was fourth again. So obviously, Mercedes took a little bit of that mid-season to kind of rejig a little bit, re-strategize.
Yeah.
At that point, though, you have to say Lewis Hamilton was still firmly in the lead, and even though they weren't winning the races, they were still reaching the podium, and he still had a comfortable lead where he could go into Mexico and U.S. and win the driver's title, which he ultimately did this weekend, even with Valtteri Bottas winning. My question for you is this. Does Lewis Hamilton driving the best car since, being Mercedes has dominated?
Yeah.
Dominated,
in the hybrid era.
Since 2014, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Is it fair? Does that skew your view of Lewis Hamilton as one of the greatest drivers ever, considering he's been in the best car now for almost a full decade, really?
But the best car is subjective, isn't it? As well, you got to remember these top teams, whether it's Red Bull, whether it's Ferrari, whether it's Mercedes. We have to remember that those top three teams have vast amounts of money and resource. It's how they implement that money and resource. And then you've got teams like Red Bull that have partnered with Honda. Obviously, Honda had a disastrous return to Formula One with McLaren. Then they've moved over to Red Bull, and they're getting their game together. It's got to be said about Honda. And so this application of resource and finances is what drives these teams forward, these top three teams forward with their research and development and their aerodynamicists and everything else. I think we can say that one thing that in fact Martin Brundle and Crofty mentioned on the coverage over the weekend from the US Grand Prix is the fact that the Mercedes team as an organism, as a team, has the most wonderful ethos and structure. There is very little infighting. One thing we can say about the Ferraris is they are passionate.
Well, Italian. They're Italian.
They're Italian. Right? Exactly right. They are passionate. And sometimes passion can interfere with the smooth running of the team because people have different ideas. Whereas there's almost that kind of sort of German organized ethos to the Mercedes team. And everyone gets along really well. A lot of people have been offered jobs with other teams from Mercedes to go to other teams, and they won't take it even for more money just because of the wonderful structure that team has and the way that everyone works in symbiosis, if you like, to make the team what it is. And I think that is a key point of why the Mercedes team is so successful. Niki Lauda, bless him and rest his soul, was an amazing influence. Toto Wolff and Niki Lauda worked so well together. Of course, Toto Wolff, the team principal of Mercedes. And I know Toto Wolff, as we saw on the coverage over the weekend, misses Niki dearly. And I know Lewis, doffed his proverbial red cap to Niki as well. And, I think it's the formulation of that cohesive team and the lack of, infighting, if you like, between departments and just the way the whole thing comes together is what gives you the car for Lewis to perform at the level he's performing at. The team is greater than one man, although you need a great driver to do it as well. It's a whole thing.
So Lewis Hamilton's 34 years old.
Yeah.
You would say that he's probably
an older driver.
Yeah, but he only 83 wins to Schumacher's 91. He's got 6 titles to Schumacher's 7s. He's outpulled Schumacher 87 to 68, and podiums he's 150 to Schumacher's 155.
Yeah.
I would say, Lewis doesn't have to race. He's the top paid driver in F1.
Worth millions.
He's worth millions, billions, but he can stay in the sport, probably till he's 40, I would say. I don't know, but he's going to pass Schumacher, and he's going to go to that echelon where people are going to consider him one of the greatest drivers ever.
Absolutely, and there's something biblically bad happens to Mercedes as a team, which I don't see with its current structure. I think we can probably say, hey, look, even if it's not next year, it could be the year after. Or it might be next year that he gets those 7. Massive changes coming to Formula One in 2021, as we've seen in the racing press. change of cars, the way they drive, the way they handle their downforce and aero packages, a complete redesign. If you've seen the new cars that have been unveiled by the Formula One administration over the last couple of weeks. So maybe next year's the year and it'll equal Schumacher. But hey, one thing that they're doing is about making the racing closer. And this is why these changes are coming in 2021. So we could see with these changes that do come in, maybe that will even up the playing field a little bit. You never know. We could see a very feisty Max Verstappen in 2021 with closer racing and more evenly matched cars and budget caps. That's one of the key things. Mercedes.
Like a salary cap. That's interesting.
Absolutely. It's huge. Like, you imagine someone like what was Sauber, Alfa Romeo Sauber. You imagine their budget compared to someone like Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes. They're poles apart. And this is why we get this disparity between the top teams, the midfield teams, and the bottom teams. Look at Williams now. It's horrible to see Williams.
It's embarrassing, really.
It is.
It's really embarrassing.
And look at the struggle McLaren have had.
Well, you know what? I think, you look at Carlos Sainz, he's 7th overall in the driver's standings. Lando Norris is 11th. I think they've done well with what they have.
Absolutely.
Because I think the credit to the drivers, you know what I mean? Taking the car, a lot of that middle class, even Renault starting to get it together. Daniel Ricciardo, I've read somewhere he's the 3rd highest paid driver in Formula One. People asked why he left Red Bull when it was a superior car, didn't want to battle with Max Verstappen anymore for top dog status. And now if Renault, as a manufacturer who also, builds for other teams.
That's right.
If they can get themselves together with the same salary cap, that would be nice. That'd be a good move. Getting a good driver like Daniel Ricciardo, who is probably his skills driving and the car he drives aren't matching up.
The Honey Badger's amazing, bless him. He's one of the kings of the late breakers. And, We've got to remember these young drivers are coming through the field. So if you take someone like Alexander Albon, who I think has been driving amazingly, considering he's been in that Red Bull car alongside Max Verstappen for 3 or 4 races. Look what Alexander Albon's achieving. So you imagine these midfield teams with budget caps so that the spending is more even across the field. I think we could see some big shakeups in 2021.
And that would make, I think the general fans, the general public, the non-niche Formula One fans, that would make the sport more exciting.
Of course it would.
We talked about it, I think in Let's Talk Sports 6 months ago on the former Keenan 27, how great the Netflix series was, and they're doing it again right now.
Incredible.
How if this sport was more competitive, I think I talked on a previous episode, the Formula One always gets into the danger zone of it's boring, it's predictable, right? So they need to do something to make it more competitive. And I think all the things you're talking about, changing the cars, salary cap, to me, this is actually the first I'm hearing of it.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, to kind of level the playing field. Let's shift a little bit. So you mentioned Albon, we talked about Leclerc. Are those two of the drivers that probably exceed expectations this year, or is there anyone else that you think has done well?
Albon, actually, I've got to say, I didn't know much about Alexander Albon until he came to Formula One, and I sort of did a bit of reading up on, and he's come through the normal school, the karting and then the different formulas, and now ended up in Formula One. Great opportunity for Alexander Albon to be placed with Red Bull. Don't forget as well, that seat is by no means confirmed for him for 2020.
Still auditioning.
He's still got 2 races to go. We wind up the season in Abu Dhabi at the end of the Formula One season. And they don't, you got to remember, Red Bull has options, They've got many drivers that want to be in that seat. I would like to see Alexander Albon being the one that maintains that seat. I think he's driven superbly. You got to remember as well, you take a young driver like him, like Austin at the weekend, first time he's driven around that track in a Formula One car. He's never raced there before in any other formula. And look at the performance he put in, a great performance as well. And he's out qualifying Max Verstappen sometimes.
And alternatively, disappointments. We taught you're a big Nico Hulkenberg fan.
Yeah,
he loses his seat to Esteban Ocon. Antonio Giovinazzi actually got renewed for next year by Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
Haas decides
they're keeping
Kevin Roman Grosjean, our favorite whipping boy.
Yeah.
So in general, who do you think are the biggest disappointments this season with 2 races to go?
Biggest disappointments for me, actually, I'm surprised Haas are as far down as they are. They've got a Ferrari engine in the back of their car. I think they've just suffered with aerodynamic issues and downforce issues and getting the car to turn on right. I mean, Gene Haas is a smart man with a lot of money. I'm sure he will come back and get that car sorted. It's just going to take some time. Are his drivers necessarily the right drivers? Well, bless poor old Roman. I am kind of shocked that he's still in that car.
Especially when Nico Hulkenberg's available.
Right.
So, like, let me ask you, you're the savant, you're the principal. Nico Hulkenberg, yes or no, is a better driver than Roman Grosjean and or Kevin Magnussen, yes or no?
Definitely a better driver than Roman Grosjean.
So what is the affinity to keeping Roman Grosjean?
I think it's money. I think Roman Grosjean brings huge sponsorship to the team.
All the cooking book money he brings.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at other teams, that like if you look at Checo, if you look at Sergio Perez.
Now, mind you, though, Perez.
He's a good driver.
10th overall. And right there, and of course, Lance Stroll, the principal, Lawrence Stroll's his son. So, of course, he's 15th. But there you go, like one of the biggest earners in terms of sponsorship.
That's right.
He's had a good year.
And Checo Perez, brings millions, if not billions of dollars to that team with Claro, their cell phone sponsor. Now, if you lost Checo Perez, you can imagine what a huge, especially without these budget caps at the moment, you can imagine how much that would affect the budgetary constraints that team has. You imagine losing $10 million, $15 million a year. They can't afford to get rid of Sergio Perez, And I think there is a lot of that at the moment. There are people not necessarily in seats because they are the best driver for that team, but because they're midfield teams and the budgetary constraints that they have, they can't afford to replace that driver with another driver that doesn't bring in the same level of finance.
It's interesting because that theory, that methodology goes back years. You watch, Nicky Lauda, he bought his way, took a loan out, had wealthy parents who didn't approve what he did. He bought his way into not one, but two teams.
Yeah.
But he had the skill and the mentality, but that sort of buying your way onto a team and bringing sponsorship is a big part. Let's wrap it up here. 2 races to go. We talked about the people that have exceeded expectations. We talked about some of the disappointments. Also, Valtteri Bottas gets one more year with Mercedes. So where does Nico Hulkenberg end up? And, of course, Esteban Ocon taking his spot in Renault. Anything else you can forecast going into this next year in terms of drivers? I heard Mick Schumacher, but now Giovinazzi coming back.
Yeah.
That kind of poo-poos that idea.
Yeah.
Maybe Schumacher comes in as, a third driver for Ferrari in simulation.
I mean, he might come in as a test driver.
Yeah.
Or a sim driver. There were a few of those around. I mean, Anthony Davidson, one of Sky's commentary team, he does a lot of sim work for McLaren. He's like one of their reserve guys that's always working at Brackley. I can't see in the top teams now, with the exception of who will have that seat at Red Bull. I hope it's Alexander Albon. I can't see any major changes. I think we all know they're pretty much set. Silly season is out the way. Driver change-ups are kind of done. I don't really. I'd hate to see the Hulkster leave Formula One. I really would, but I just don't know at this current time where he's going to go. And the sad thing about Nico Hulkenberg is he's a very talented driver. He's just a bit like Sergio Perez. He's missed the boat when it comes to getting a chance on the top teams. Maybe just through bad luck. Maybe there's nothing available. If you look at those top teams, they've kind of all been locked out for quite some time.
Well, there's only one seat left, and that's what Robert Kubica's not coming back, right? So Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, would Nico Hulkenberg drive for Williams?
I mean, he'd be a great signing for Williams because he's a very talented driver and he'd bring a lot to the team. Williams have got, some difficult issues to face over coming months once we finish the end of this season. Their car's just not performed well and they've just not had the budget to deal with it. And that's dreadfully sad. We'll see how it shapes up for 2020. And my hope, like I say, talking about drivers and making that playing field more evenly, is these budget caps and engineering caps that the FIA are going to impose on the teams to try and level up this playing field. Wouldn't it be great if we went into that first corner or the second corner and we got to the stage where those midfield teams, the Renaults, the Husses, the Alfa Romeos, can you imagine if they all have a chance in evenly matched cars to take the pole, take first place or take second place? I think it would be so much more fun for the people watching at home.
Absolutely. And you know what? We will always have budget for you, Mark Lee.
Thank you so much. Oh, George,
always
stop
have
it.
budget. It's lights out on Let's Talk Sports Radio. Mark Lee from Z99, our one and only principal Formula One analyst. A great debut for Mark Lee. Thanks, Mark.
No worries.
All right, that's it for Let's Talk Sports Radio. Join us every Saturday right here at 9 a.m. on 94.9 Bob FM. For Early's Media, I'm a sports guy. And I'm a sports guy.